Welcome back to another episode of the How To Home Podcast. My name is Aaron Maciel, and with me as always is my lovely co-host Tracy Pendergast.
Hello.
And joining us today we have Ricky Maciel, who is an architectural designer. We're going to dive into architectural design and when and how to pull permits. Welcome to the How To Home Podcast, presented by FilterBuy. I'm your host, Aaron Maciel, a DIY home improvement enthusiast and full-time content creator running MrFixItDIY.com. Alongside me is my co-host, Tracy Pendergast, a home and lifestyle blogger operating her website, HeyTracy.com. Each week, we'll cover the real-world ups and downs of owning a home, answer your questions, and if we don't have the answers, we'll talk to some experts to help you get the most out of your remodel, repair, and home improvement projects. So without further ado, let's start the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't you give us a little bit of a background on, what it is that you do, what your experience is?
So basically what we do is we do architectural design. We mostly do residential, and we do room additions from basic remodels to brand new homes to second floor additions to ADUs. That's a new popular thing that we're doing. So anything that have to do with residential that requires plans and permits, that's what we do.
I'm kind of nerding out because I love doing design and architectural stuff. I have tons of questions for you. But before we dive into that, I just want to remind the audience that the show is kind of powered by your suggestions, your questions. So if you have some questions that we can incorporate on the show or suggestion for future episode topics, please give us a call at 978-709-1040. That's our voicemail number. You can call in anytime, or you can hit us up on social media. We'll make sure to post those links in the show notes. And also, you can email me. You can email me at aaron@howtohome.com.
We also want to thank our founding sponsor, FilterBuy. They are an HVAC filter provider. You can save 5% when you subscribe. And obviously, filters are really important. They cut energy costs and they prolong the life of your units. They're very important to us right now as we do our remodel. They're keeping the air nice and clean for us and the kids. So
it's a super easy service to use. You can go to filterbuy.com. You just follow the prompts. It asks you what your sizes are to input for your, furnace air conditioning units. I have 2 of them. I'm subscribed to it. I have them delivered every 3 months, and you don't ever have to set a reminder of when to change your filters. You don't have to worry about making sure that your units are running efficiently or that energy bills are lower because you're constantly changing them.
And everything ships within 24 hours.
Everything ships within 24 hours, and everything is manufactured and made right here in the USA. And they do custom sizes. So if you have a kind of a weird unit or something that you're having trouble finding, maybe at a big box store or whatever, they've got you covered. So
good stuff.
We want to thank them for being the founding partner of the show. We couldn't do the show without them. So let's dive in. I've got questions. So I hope you're ready.
Let's do it.
How did you get into it?
Basically, I started back in 2010. I started my business, Ultimate Drafting Services, and I just had the passion of working with architecture and homes. But I started all the way back, of course, when I was in high school. I took drafting class, and from there I went to trade school. But ultimately, it was the desire to work with architecture, just working with homes, drafting, and I just like the business. So especially helping people, helping homeowners, helping those who need to do a remodel or an addition, and then make their dreams reality.
Tell us a little bit about your day-to-day, like how you approach architectural design, or how a client might approach you and what you do.
Yeah, it starts with the phone call. From there, we just start the conversation. They start asking me if I need help with to create plans, to do a remodel or an addition. And then I start asking them questions. I do follow-up questions. Where's your house located? How big is your house? Which walls do you want to remove? Or what type of addition do you want to do? So from those type of questions, we do an appointment. And then from there, we do a free cost analysis. Basically, we're just going to go out there and we do a free consultation. And then from there, we start talking to them. And then I start helping them how to visualize what they want to do. So they already have an idea what they want to do most of the time. And so, I want to move this wall. I want to make this kitchen like this, or I want to do this here. And then so what I start directing them is, okay, what can they do within the parameters that the city is going to pass? Because I think logically is what the city is going to approve. So if they want to do a certain thing, I have to make sure that it meets the code. So whatever advice I give them, I tell them, okay, if you want to do this, you just have to make sure that we're within the parameters. So that's why I help them in that way. And then from there, we just start with the contract. And then from there, we get rock and rolling.
How does a client or how does a person know that they need your services?
Typically, if they don't know, like they just want to, I want to do this. Can I what do I need to do? The best thing to do is to contact their local city, or you could just go to the website at their city, and they have a list of items that don't require permits, and there's some that do. And so you could go to the website, or you could call building and safety, or you could call planning department. And so you could ask any questions, and you could ask them, because, I want to do this to my kitchen. I want to add this, or I want to do the second floor, or I want to change the pitch of the roof, or whatever it is. You just go over there and you ask them. Or I just want to change the shingles. What do I need to do? You just go over there and ask them.
Going through the city can be a pretty overwhelming process, especially when you have so many different pieces. So if somebody works with you, are you the direct middleman between your client and the city? Do you take care of all of that?
Yes. So in our process, we take care of everything. So from concept, design, all the way to the permits are issued. So we handle all the city transactions. We do the plan check process with the city. We do handle all the corrections. And so we do all the back and forth with the city.
What's the difference between what you do as an architectural design and maybe an interior design?
So interior design is just what is described. It's an interior design. So they design the interior. So for example, this wall here, they picked the color. They picked the aesthetics of the room.
The finishes.
The furniture, everything. So they do everything like that. What I do is I do just what the city needs to approve. So basically it's construction documents is what I...
You make sure the wall doesn't fall down.
Yes. Yes. And I'll make sure that it meets the code. So I make sure that the outlets that are shown on the plans meet the code. So anything you do for the contractor to build or homeowner to build, that's what I do. The interior design is like what it's going to look like at the end with the finishes.
So someone comes to you with this grand dream of what they want their house to look like, and it involves taking out walls or moving windows or doors. What are the steps for you to figure out if it's doable?
So I would just do a site visit, and anything is doable. It's just how much money you have. You could pretty much do anything. You could use, of course, if you do remove a lot of windows, you want to make this nice collapsible door windows. I mean, you just, some points, depending on the span, you just have to add steel posts. So it all depends what your budget is and what you want to do. But pretty much anything is doable.
Yeah, and full disclosure, so Ricky's done the plans for our house. My husband and I have never done anything like this before. We didn't change the structural design of our last home. So we've had to come back to you a couple times and say, whoops, we didn't know this had to be a part of the plan. Once you start drawing things into a plan, how firmly do you have to stick to what you've provided the city?
Once we submit the plan to the city, if you want to make changes, you can make changes. But we just have to go through the city process, and we have to get them to approve the changes. So anything that is related to structurally, you have to go back to the city and have them approve it.
Does that significantly slow down the process?
It depends on the city. Depending on the workload or the way how they work, you have to submit the plans in, and it could take weeks. Some work could be done over the counter. Of course, it all depends on the scope of work. If it's something very extensive, then they have to take time to review.
Yeah, I would suggest, just as someone who's going through this process right now, is really, really have a clear vision before you ask a lot of questions, have a clear vision, maybe have your contractor lined up and discuss with them before you start putting pen to paper and submitting those plans, because
before you start tearing your house apart and then realize, I want to change
that
something.
too. Yeah. Luckily, we didn't tear anything apart before we started making revisions, but there were things we just didn't think of until the contractor came into our house and we kind of talked about the nuts and bolts of things.
Pre-visualization is one thing, but when you're actually in the work, there's always going to be some level of change.
Absolutely.
Because you're kind of basing things on, looking at the house as it currently is and what's possible and knowing the codes and all that stuff. But you open up a wall, and just because something is supposed to be a certain way in a remodel doesn't mean that it was that way. So your plans might say, this is what it's supposed to be like. The contractor's seeing something different. And then they're like, okay, now I got to get it to match his plans. So there's changes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's things that you want to do, but you don't know if they're possible until you see what's in the wall. So it's, for us, one of the issues we had is, do we put it in the plan and hope that it will work? Or do we leave it out until we open up the wall? And then once we find out, resubmit? These are just little things. What would you suggest in those cases?
Ultimately, would probably be to talk with the contractor. and see how what the cost would be from the contractor from a standpoint like that. I would probably suggest to, if you want to know 100%, is you could open up the wall, or you can remove the ceiling or go into the attic and see what if it's a bearing wall, if there's load carrying on that wall, if it's going to impact the foundation. So those are the type of things you want to do first. So when sometimes we get a client who calls us, he goes, I want to remove this wall. I go, the first thing I do is like, what is that wall doing? What is that wall carrying? So sometimes I go into the attic, or we look in the foundation. So we typically see from the attic. So the wall is usually doing something. Sometimes it might not be doing anything. It all depends how the ceiling joists are sitting on them. So the best thing to do is to go into the attic to look and see if it's a load-bearing wall and what ramifications could come from that.
Before I bought my current home, I was considering buying the home that we previously lived in. And I want to run a scenario by you and see how you would recommend, or how I would get involved with you and what your process would be. So the previous home that we had was it was listed as a 3-bedroom, but it was really a 2-bedroom with a pass-through kind of office area and a single bath. And I knew that wasn't going to work for us. So I knew immediately that it was going to need to add a second bathroom, and it really didn't have like a master suite. So I had kind of prevised this idea of adding like a 400 square foot, kind of knock out the back wall of the house, add a master bath off of that. So then it would become kind of a true 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Now, if I came to you and said I wanted to do that, what's the scenario, or what's the process like of working with you?
So just like how you explain, we would talk about that over the phone. And then from there, we will schedule an appointment. So then after that, I would go visit your property and then start looking at where this addition is going to go. So typically, let's say you're mentioning it's going to go in the back. So the first thing I do is I go there and I look at your property. I'm standing in the back, I'm standing on the sides, and I have my tape measure with me. And what I'm doing is I'm checking that it meets the required setbacks from the side and from the back. The other thing I'm also doing is I'm also checking that the size of the addition is within the requirements within the size of the home. So to make sure that we don't exceed the certain amount of square footage that the house at that property is allowed. So those are the first things I look for. Once we have that and everything looks good, we start a contract, and then from there you get us to go on. And then after that, once everything is good, then send me or myself, one of my team members, and we measure the house. We have to measure everything. We have to measure the rooms, the bathrooms, closets, everything, because what the city wants to see is they want to see how the house is going to flow to the addition, how the addition is integrated to the house as a whole. How's the addition serving the house? And so we have to measure the entire site, and we also have to measure the floor plan of the house. So when we present it to the city, the first thing they're going to check is to make sure that the addition is within the required setbacks, meaning the distance between the house and the property line on all sides that's affected, including the garage. There might be a garage there. So the garage has to have a car has to have a turning radius into the garage. Because I just use my garage as storage, I never use it. It doesn't matter. You still have to meet a turning radius. So the addition may affect the garage or may impact how you drive into the garage. So those are the things I look at first to make sure that it's doable. And if it's not doable, then I make suggestions. I would just say, you know what, you can't really go up to here. Let's say your house is 3 feet from the property line, and you want to make your addition to continue the same line. But today's code is different from back in the 1950s. So now you have to make your addition 5 feet from the setback. So it's going to be staggered. So you have your house and it's going to stagger in an additional 2 feet, for example. So then I make that note that to yourself or to a homeowner to make sure, look, I know you want it like this, but the code is going to make you kick in the additional 2 feet. So then I do that. So then after that, once we have it measured, based on what you want inside, I ask questions. Okay, what do you want inside? I also, when we come up with a window or anything like that, I also, of course, make sure what your budget is, because the more window or the more opening you have, the less wall you have. So the engineer has to do something about that. You can make it cost effective and give them at least 3 to 4 feet at the ends of it. Or if the budget doesn't matter, then we could put steel posts and you make the entire wall almost like a glass window. So those are the things that we would, have a conversation on. And then after that, then I create the plans. I do a preliminary plan first. So I will email you a set of plans of what it's going to look like first. So I would send you a floor plan that shows the entire complete floor plan of the house, and then the floor plan of the addition. So, and it's showing it all together. So you can make changes to the windows, electrical, whatever you want to do. We make changes on that, and we go back and forth. And then once you say, okay, this is what I'm done, I'm happy with this, the next step is to do the elevation to see, that way you can see what the elevation looks like.
And when you say elevation, it's like an exterior view kind of what the house would look like.
Correct. So it's going to be like if you're standing in the backyard and you're looking straight to the back of your addition, and then to the sides, and then one from the top, and then that way you can see everything like that. And then once you approve that, or you can make changes, I want to do this, I want to do that. So then once that's done, then we go to the second phase, which is to have engineering started on this. And so I would consult with an engineer, and the proposal that we have, it's already included. The engineer is already included. And they do their thing. And then they come, they look at the property, look at the framing, or we provide pictures for them. At the same time, while we're doing that, during that process, as we go back and forth with yourself or with the homeowner, we're also going to the city to making sure that whatever we do meets their requirements. So you don't do all this work, we don't spend all this time and money with the engineer, and it turns out that we can't do it. So of course, throughout the process, we're double checking with the city to make sure it meets all the requirements and parameters. So that's what we do. So we submit the plans to the city, and then after that, we pay the fees. Usually the clients will give us a check, and then so that way they don't have to go to the city at all. So we handle all the city transactions. We fill out the applications. We fill everything out, we submit it in, and then from there, they give us a call once the plans are ready for pickup. So we pick up, and there's always local ordinances that they have, or a calculation that has to be done or addressed, so we handle the corrections, and then we go back. And so we do this until finally the plans are approved. So the process could take weeks, it could take months, or it could be over the counter, which means that it could be done in one day.
It just depends on the scope of the work. That was a question I was going to have. It sounds like you guys carry a ton of weight. You do a lot of work. And I was like, well, how long does all this take? So like a homeowner, depending on the scope of the work, they should know. And then if they're doing a huge project, let's say it's March, I want to have this done by the end of the summer. I want to get in touch with somebody like you, pretty quick, so that, you can have several months to knock all this stuff out. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So it takes for us, it could take a matter of, usually within a couple of weeks, we have everything done on our end. What the length part would be at the city. Every city is different. It all depends on the scope of work, as you mentioned. So County of LA, they have a pretty extensive process. But it all depends on your local jurisdiction of what their plan check process is. A lot of the cities are backed up. They have a lot of work coming in, and some of the cities don't have the staff, so they outsource their plans to an outside consultant, and then they have their timeline that they meet.
In my current house, I kind of want to do what we've discussed. I want to remodel the kitchen. I kind of want to open up a wall, have, lower cabinets and, pass through and arrange, all that stuff into the dining room area. And I would like to do that in the next, maybe year or so, but maybe what I should do is kind of come up with a plan, approach somebody, like yourself. And then from there, knowing that I have about a year's time before I have like the budget in place and all that stuff, just kind of start the process and just start that communication, and then tell you maybe like, I want to do this like, next year. And then you submit the plans, much later on.
Yes. The sooner you start, of course, the sooner the process begins. And then depending on the scope, the city will take however long they take. And there's things we can't control. Sometimes you're working on a particular house and it discovers that there's termite that just affected everything. Or sometimes, the plans, of course, are done perfectly square. The house is not perfectly square. And so, those things happen after the fact. So once the plans are approved and everything is done, and then there's issues at the field, then we have to address those items as well.
Does the contractor come to you, or does the contractor go to the homeowner, then the homeowner has to come to you?
It could be both ways. So sometimes the contractor say, hey, you know what, we put a post in here, but turns out that there's plumbing and everything is going on there, but we're gonna have to move the post, or we're gonna have to put a bridge or put a beam or something like that. So the contractor will contact to us, and the contractor, of course, will let the homeowner know. So we work with both. We work with the homeowner and the contractor.
Is there a difference between what you do and an architect?
They're pretty much very similar. The only difference between architects is they're state licensed. A designer, pretty much what we do is we have similar skills, but an architect is licensed. A lot of times, designers are usually more cost effective to use, and so homeowners want to work with us.
And then once most of your clients get the plans from you, do you think a bulk of them DIY your plans, or do you think a lot of people are using contractors to bring them to life?
We get both. So it's more recommended usually to use a contractor because they assume all liability. So the contractor assumes all liability on anything that happens to the house. If a homeowner does the work or does a DIY, they're welcome to do it. State law, you could do it, but they assume all liability. If you hire a subcontractor, if you hire someone, you hire your cousin or your uncle or someone to do it, they get hurt, you are liable. So the homeowner will be liable on that. So it's usually recommended to have a contractor to pull a permit.
Because you have the license and the insurance and all that type of stuff, and
they
it
have
doesn't
liability
fall on
insurance. Anything, it's their CSLB. So yeah, their license is on the line.
Does a project have to be a certain scope before you would take it on? If I wanted to just remodel a half bath or something like that.
Yeah, if there is a scope that we don't get involved in. Like for example, you're just replacing fixtures. Like let's say you gut a whole bathroom. You could gut a whole bathroom and just go to the city and just get permits. Basically, all it is you go to the city and you fill an application. I'm replacing a shower or a tub or a toilet and sink and replacing outlets, and that's it. And then they give you a permit and you start doing your thing. When we get involved is when you're removing a wall or something more renovated that the city requires plans to do that.
So like a floor plan modification, something like that, like where you're opening up walls.
Yes. What's popular now is a lot of the homes are in the 50s or older homes. The rooms they're all enclosed rooms. A lot of what's popular now is to have an open concept.
Right.
So people, you know what? Sometimes the people go to different homes, so they go to open houses and they like this open concept. Like, I want to do this to our house. So I want to just take out that wall. Look, I saw that kitchen like this, and I want to put an island here. So I just want to do this. So people think like, okay, well, I'll just take out a wall, but they don't realize that that wall is doing something. Or they get code enforcement involved. So the city truck is passing by and goes, oh, look, I wonder what they're doing. And they have a dumpster out there.
Why is that house kind of like going back and forth like this?
Yeah, why are these people carrying all this material out here? I don't see no permits. And what they do is they put the address and they look on their system. It goes, wait a minute, they don't have a permit, so then they get tagged. And so, yeah, you always want to check with the city first.
Yeah, and if that's happening, there's fines involved. There's all sorts of stuff. So
they give you a break as long as if you act in good faith. But if you don't, yeah, fines good to get involved.
I think one of the most overwhelming parts of this whole process for us has just been the back and forth between the city dealing with that, and then also the inspection process. So for anyone that's about to do this and wants to know what they can expect from the inspector who's going to come in and out, what do you have to have ready in your home for that inspector when he shows up, or
so
she?
That's when the contractor comes in. So the contractor will help. The contractor will usually call the city inspector to come and inspect, and they follow the plan. So when the inspector comes in, it's usually foundation or whatever the permit is for, and they're going to come and inspect that, and they're going to make sure that whatever they come and inspect matches the plans.
But are they looking throughout the rest of your home as well?
Sometimes, if you have like a glaring thing that is not permitted or something that they cannot, they have to admit, then yeah, it could be, they do look at it. But sometimes if it's just this one thing and everything looks normal, then they just come and just look at that.
And I think we'll dive into that possibly in future episodes. There's a lot of stuff, electrically or plumbing or whatever, that the codes have changed or evolved over the years, So what was done in 1956 or 1960 or whatever is certainly different than what the new codes are. So you're adding new electrical in your kitchen remodel. Well, your panel is not up to current code, they got to replace all of that stuff. And an electrical inspector will come in and tell you that. And that could be additional costs that you didn't think about.
I was going to say, we might want to talk about that in budgeting for DIY as well, because those are just hidden costs that are scary, quite frankly.
I mean, when an inspector comes in, their job is to inspect it and to make sure it's up to current codes and matches what the plans that somebody like you would put together. And if they see stuff that isn't up to the code, it's ultimately going to be dumped onto the homeowner to pay to get it up to code, because they won't stamp it otherwise.
Right. I think we had one open fine. It was for a water heater or something that was actually just at the city, like an open-ended thing when we went to submit our plans.
So how do you know, if I come in with a grandiose vision of what I want my house to be, how do you know if it's achievable based on the home? Like, how would you evaluate it?
It all depends on how the house is being supported. Again, it depends on the location. Of course, historical areas, you have to abide by the historical ordinances. You can't, in historical, for example, for historical areas, you can't just, you know what, this is an old wooden home, I want to put a nice fresh vinyl, different type of window. You can't do that. It has to maintain aesthetically to match everything around the neighborhood. But if it's like a typical home, we just see how the house is being supported, and we just have to make sure that it's adequately supported depending on what you want to do. And we have to make sure that if you do an addition, we have to be within the setbacks, within the parameters that the city allows you. Depending, like, for example, you can't just build, I want to maximize my terrain. I have a big lot. I want to maximize all the way to the property line. Because no, you have to first check with planning department, because they have constraints on your property. And the reason is because they want to maintain an image of all the neighborhood. They want to make it look very similar. So you could have design, you could have color, you could do different type of roofs and things like that. Make it a little bit how you like it, but you would want to check with local city codes to see what you're allowed to do, and then the structure and the foundation to see what you can do there.
What can someone expect budget-wise when working with an architectural designer like yourself? What kind of costs are involved, or what would the range be?
Well, the ranges, it all depends on the scope of work. So we work with very basic projects to very high-end projects. So it can range from $2,000 or $1,500, depending on the scope of work, all the way up to $10,000, $15,000, $18,000. So it all depends on how much work you're doing, what extensive it is, what type of process the city requires. It all depends. So it can range from anywhere. So the best thing to do is to consult us, and then we can see and they can provide you an estimate.
So I have a question in line with the budgeting thing. Does a client come to you with a budget in mind, or do you, through your designs, say, this is how much something like this may cost you to do?
Yeah, sometimes we do get that question. I don't get involved with construction. So the homeowner first should do is to contact a contractor to see what this was going to cost. Ultimately, the contractor won't know 100% because they need a set of plans. So but first thing would be is to communicate with the contractor and say, look, I want to do this. I want to knock down this wall. I want to put a window here. What is your experience? How much does this cost? Because they know what the lumber costs. They know what the materials is going to cost, how much concrete, what rebar is going to be needed. They have experience with city. They know what the inspectors are going to expect. So those type of things are good for the contractor to answer that, and they could best answer budget costs for construction.
What are your tips for making this design process through the permitting process go as smoothly as possible?
I would suggest is to first, if it's a couple, for the husband and wife to be on the same page.
What?
That's not possible.
Well, at least to have, to be good on, do the best they can in that, right. And then sleep on it. So just think about it, dream about it, put it on paper, just have like a set, okay, this is what we want to do, and then have like a program. Sometimes they have programs, this is what I want to do. It's just like, you could doodle on paper.
Yeah, see, so my husband and I work very differently in that sense. I am just such a creative-brained, visual person. I cannot imagine things the way he can. Like, I'm not mathematical. I can't visualize spaces. So for me, he'll show me something on the plans and I'll say, wait, let me pull it up on Pinterest. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I think that's a really good recommendation, is whichever way you visualize things, bring those to the table and talk about them.
Yes, exactly.
This is where I nerd out a little bit. So I'm a big previs guy. I love doing this stuff. And if I were to go back again, I would listen to my child self, where I found this old notebook that says, like, what do you want to do when you get older? And it says architect. And I use every software out there that I can find to see it before I do it. Is there software out there that you use to do your plans that, DIYers like myself could use, or are there programs available out there that?
Yeah, well, there's some free ones. There's Google SketchUp. They have, the cool thing about Google SketchUp, you could pretty much create, is basically using objects, and you could shape the objects, and you could make walls and windows, and basically the walls are, they could make a window, you punch a hole. The cool thing about that is it has a lot of materials that you could add. So you could add, like, for example, on this wall here, it has a brick pattern. You could add whatever type of pattern that you want on the walls. Same thing with the countertops. On the floors, they have a library of aesthetics materials that you could add on there, so they could try to create this picture image quality that you're looking for. And then you could edit, it even has the sun on there, or the type of day, how will this part looks like. For example, you're doing a patio. How would the trellis that you want to do, how would it look like in a certain time of day or a certain time of year?
That's cool.
I use a program called Home Designer Pro, which is from a company called Chief Architect. It's not cheap. I spend quite a bit of money on it. What I like about it is it kind of does a lot of the work for you from a planning and from a building perspective. If I just draw a line that says, I want this to be an exterior wall, well, it builds in, studs 16 on center. It adds the sheeting on the outside. And it tells you how thick the overall like exterior wall would be. So I think, as far as bringing it to the city, like what you are saying, it may be enough, but I'm not sure if it, is completely up to code. But as far as a homeowner goes, if they want to do Google SketchUp kind of render or something, that will give you like a great starting point, a vision of what it is that they really want. And then you can go in and plug in the nuts and bolts, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. From there, we just add all the necessary dimensions, notes, make sure it meets the requirements, the code requirements, and do that. And the program that you have, that you use, some of those could pretty much do everything. So if you know all the codes and everything, you could pretty much do the plans yourself and just take them to the city.
Yeah, the only difference, I'm not sure, obviously regional ordinances, even county to county, city to city, they vary.
Yes.
So I don't know how a program like that can keep up to code, or, I don't know if it, if you can update it or what. But I think, it's never a bad idea to run something like that by somebody like yourself. And you might say, this might be sufficient. You don't really need our services.
Oh, yeah. As long as it has all the information needed. Sometimes I tell clients, sometimes they give me something like, wow, you could pretty much do this. Like, oh, why did I get you? But of course, but I help them with everything. So, but we use that, and that could be cost effective for us. So the client could save money because they did pretty much all the hard work. And so we'll give them a discount, because they have everything planned already drawn. All we got to do is just make sure, but sometimes we do have to, of course, incorporate into our plans, and then we do our standards and make sure to do that. But all the hard work was already done because it's already been designed and planned, and they already took it to the city and make sure that it works. And then we come in, so there's different options of doing that.
Who pulls the permits? Is it you, or does the contractor then need to pull the permit once they start the work?
With our service, the clients sometimes don't have time to go to pull permits. So sometimes we work with developers and contractors who use our services all the time. So they don't have time to go and spend time at the city and sit down and wait and pull permits. So they contract us to do it. So part of our services may include us pulling permits. The only thing that we need is a letter of authorization from them, and it has to get notarized. And that the cities are obligated to accept our letter, and then we pull the permits. And that's how we do that.
So for people that aren't in the LA area and can't use your awesome services, what should homeowners look for when they're going to hire an architectural designer or an architect? What are some things to look for?
They want to look for experience. They want to look at past projects that they worked on. Have they worked in the area? They want to be able to see the type of projects that they've done. Ideally, would be one that is similar to what they're working on, what they want to do. So that way they could see, look, this is the plan that I've done that is similar like your job. like your house, and it shows everything. Plus, the plans have been approved, so they have experience. So that's what I would look for, is to have someone who has experience, who's done work in the area, and who could finish the project and get the plans approved.
We talked a little bit about permitting. Why should homeowners make sure that they get permits for their work?
Well, the main thing is not to get busted by code enforcement. So that's one thing, is to not to get fined or get busted by the code enforcement. Another one is the safety factor. So that's why at the city it's called building and safety. So it's to protect you, it's to protect your family. Is that when you want something done, you want to make sure that it's done right. Sometimes there's homeowners that want to cut corners and they get subcontractor not licensed, or and they go, oh, I could do this, or I've done it this way, and then just accidents happen. I've seen there's decks that just fall and break, and people could get hurt. So it's very critical to get plans or to get a permit for that, to have the inspector look at it.
Yeah, and it could also affect your ability to sell the home later. If you're putting on an addition that wasn't permitted, it can, it can't be added to the square footage of the home in terms of the sale. So you may spend all this money putting an addition on that you didn't permit, and you're thinking that you're going to get that money back when you go to sell it, and you may or may not. We
do projects like that where they call us and it goes, we have an unpermitted structure. And so some cities are becoming very strict, where they come before you sell. Then an inspector has to go to the property first to inspect that everything that's there is permitted. And if it's not, they cannot sell until it's legalized.
Wow.
Or they pull permits, or make plans to make it legal. And if it's done really shoddy work that is pretty bad, they have to demo it and rebuild it again.
Oh, that's a bummer.
That's a big cost.
Oh, yeah.
Where does a homeowner go to make sure that they are in compliance and that they get a permit for what is required? Where can they go and check and make sure?
At the building and safety office at their local city, is to pull records, permit records. And so it's the best to go there. Some of these homes are old, and so they might not have extensive records on everything. So some of these homes don't have plans. Most of the homes don't have plans at the city. Oh, I'm just going to look for a floor plan and see, maybe I could find it there. What they have there back then, they didn't use plans. They just basically fill in an application. But they typically put the size of the house or the construction, that they did, and you could match it with that. Or you could check with planning department. They pull up your house in the satellite and they look at it, and they could help you answer questions there. But ultimately what they're going to do too is pull the permit records, and that's how they could check.
So that's kind of interesting, something I never would have thought about. Maybe it's a topic for another episode, but as a buyer, right, could you go and say, this is the address of the home I'm thinking about buying. It's on the market. Can I look at the records and see what you have as the floor plan and see if it is, up to code?
Yes, definitely. Also, it's supposed to be disclosed. The real estate agent's supposed to know that there's something unpermitted, so that when you buy it, you know that it's unpermitted, so you assume all liability when you buy it. You could also double check them by going to the city to making sure what you're buying is everything is permitted and legal. And if it's not, then you understand that, okay, I'm going to get this, and I'm going to have to deal with whatever comes with it. Some homeowners call me, I just bought this house, I didn't know it was like this. And so we come and we help them. We legalize, we permit their addition or anything that happened, a patio cover. And so they assume all liability that comes with it.
I do a lot of my own work, so I am constantly wondering, what needs to be permitted, what doesn't need to be permitted, how much can I do on my own? Do I legally have to have somebody like yourself involved, or can I kind of submit my own plans? So, I think you've provided a ton of useful information for the average DIYer, homeowner, people of various budgets. Ultimately people got to know kind of what they want, right?
Yes.
If there's 5 takeaways, say for example, people have to know kind of, or be on the same page with what changes they want to make, visualize it in some way or pre-visit in some way, whether it's, sketch on a paper or, make your own plans or whatever it is. Then consider approaching somebody like yourself who knows the codes, knows what's possible, and then get a contractor involved that can give you a sense of the budget.
Correct.
Before you get actually into the scope of work.
Exactly.
And then figure out how you're going to pay for it.
Yeah,
right?
Yes.
Which I think we'll talk about
and
for
put
another
your hands
episode.
together and pray.
Yes. And ultimately, it's once you have everything done. So, and it's an accomplishment that you made. You worked hard, It gets dirty in the process. Like I know you mentioned your house is, has a lot of dust in there, but at the end of the tunnel, it's going to be nice. And that's what,
and it's going to be the way you
so
want
worth
it. It's going to be your, this is your forever home or your dream home, And I guess that's something to consider as well, when thinking about permits and building. Are you going to be there forever, or are you just trying to make it nice for resale?
And another thing, I think just what we decided to do, because you do have all of this back and forth with the city, we decided to wait until we could do all of it at once. So we're submitting one time, or, there was a couple changes, but you kind of just get it out of the way, and it's not as overwhelming, in my opinion, but that's another thing to consider. How many times do you want to go back and forth, and is it worth it to just wait a little while, save up that money, and knock it all out, literally?
Is that possible? Can you, for example, could I do, like, say I have a 2-story home and I want to remodel the whole first floor, but I want to do it in phases? Could I approach you with an overall vision, but say, this is only, what I have a budget for right now, but this is the overall scope of what I want to do?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that the city will not allow you to work on. Let's say we do a set of plans for the whole, like you said, entire first floor, but you only want to work on the kitchen, So, but the plans encompasses everything, which has to do with foundation in one area here, another area here. When the inspector comes, they cannot just approve you for the inspection only in this one area. They have to come and they look at the plan, and so they have to look at everything. So if you want to do it in phases, that would be the best thing to do, is just work on that phase.
And then just have an overall kind of cohesive vision of how it will come together.
Correct.
At the end of the day.
Yeah. So it's like you're doing one step at a time. I know the permits might be like, okay, you're submitting plans again and you're paying the permits, but it works with your budget because that's what you can do. I mean, of course, ideally in the long run is to, you save more money when you do it all at once because you have everything open, and the inspector comes and inspects all the foundation at once. But if it's not in your budget, you're more than welcome to start with the first phase first.
Well, Ricardo, thank you so much for being here. I've learned a ton of stuff, and I'm going to pick your brain offline about some more software stuff and all that.
Oh, no problem.
We can't thank you enough for being here. We want to thank our sponsor, FilterBuy, for making this episode possible. How can people get in touch with you if they have questions or they want to, use your services? Where can they reach you?
They can reach my website. It's at ultimatedraftingpro.com. Or they could email me at ultimatedrafting1@gmail.com. And right there, we have pictures, we have everything there, and be able to answer some of the questions that's going to be on there. We're also going to have like a process of how steps are laid out for starting a project. So everything should be spelled out there.
Well, thank you so much. We want to thank you guys for listening or watching, however you're choosing to consume the podcast. Please rate us on your various podcast apps and platforms. And if you have suggestions, questions, comments, feel free to reach out on our voicemail at 978-709-1040. Hit us up on social media or email me at aaron@howtohome.com. Lots of ways to get in contact, lots of ways to get involved with the show. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. The How To Home podcast is brought to you by FilterBuy.com, your one-stop direct-to-consumer replacement air filter brand, and is produced in collaboration by Amassed Media Group, LLC, and Intelligent Arts and Artists. The show is executive produced by George Ruiz and Aaron Massey.